Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a bit of a discussion video for you. I was recently asked, how do I read so much, or how can I read more, or can you suggest ways that I can read more? And I've had some of these comments vary, throughout the years that I've been on BookTube, because I do read a lot. And I've talked about it in previous videos, but maybe not as a standalone. So I'm going to talk through it, but I also want to preface this video with saying this is what works for me and how I read. And I am very well aware that I'm not the norm. And in fact, many people on BookTube are not the norm. So keep that in mind. There is absolutely no reason why anyone has to read as much as I do. And I do it for lots of different reasons, and I'll go through some of those in a moment. I'm very well aware it is not normal behavior, okay? Most people would be lucky to read a handful of books, if that, throughout the year. And that's totally fine. This is not a reflection. And I'm certainly not in competition with anyone except maybe myself occasionally, but that's a me thing. So don't feel like you have to. What I will go through is sort of the things that go through my head, why I read so much, how I do it, and maybe some things that could help you. But again, please don't think that this is going to make you a faster reader or make you read more in a year, because everyone's life is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. And, reading takes time. So just keep that in mind. So the first thing, as I said, consider your circumstances. I live by myself. I do not have children. I do not have dependents. I do not have a partner. So my time at the end of the day is my time. How I break up the day and how I do or do not do the things that I probably should do as a responsible adult is totally on me. I am someone who can very happily hyperfixate on reading and ignore the rest of my responsibilities as an adult. So I'm not saying that that's a healthy thing, but it's certainly something that helps with reading a lot. I also am a very fast reader. I know my reading pace. So if I'm physically reading a book, I can read about 100 pages an hour. And I've always been able to do that. It does depend on the book. It does depend on the author, and it does depend on the type of content. You'll notice that I don't gravitate towards nonfiction. That's because it takes me longer to read, and I don't like things that slow down my reading. So this is something that I know about myself. That's another really good point. You have to know yourself as a reader. The other thing I know is if I'm immersive reading, so if I'm reading a book and listening to the audiobook, which I really enjoy doing, I enjoy that kind of format. This will clue you in again onto how fast my reading pace is. If I'm actually physically reading the book and listening to the audiobook at the same time, the audio has to be on something like 3 times speed or higher, because I will read ahead. I'm actually faster than the audio at that pace. And audio narrators read slower, so there is that element to it. And I'm not saying that listening to 3 times speed on an audio is a normal thing, but if I'm immersive reading, that's how I know I'm a fast reader, because I'm constantly ahead of the audio. If I'm not immersive reading, if I'm just listening to the audio, it is slower, but it's about 2.5, because otherwise I tune out. So that gives you a bit of an idea about how my brain works, right? Keep that in mind, because that is the very specific set of circumstances of me as a reader. In terms of being able to find the time to read, you have to consider what you do with your time when you're not working. I don't work a job where I can read during the day. Well, I do read during the day, but I can't read what I want to read during the day. I'm a teacher, so I cannot stop and listen to an audiobook during the day. Even when I'm not in the classroom and when I've got an admin day, I cannot listen to books while I'm doing that, because I'm on call. Have to be aware of what's going on around me. So I do not read during my working day. I also don't read in the morning because I don't have time, because I'm a night owl, so I read at night. So I tend to stay up later and sleep in. I have that luxury because I live fairly close to work. My reading takes place usually between 6 o'clock and midnight, which is, 6 hours worth of work, but I do have to have dinner and I do have to do chores and things like that. So it works out to be, I have usually about 4 hours a night where I can read, or that I'm comfortable with reading. So that means I have to think about what it is that I want to get done. So if I'm actually doing if it's going to be a chore night where I'm cleaning up, or I have to do a lot of cooking, or I have to do a lot of laundry or something like that, I'm probably going to put an audiobook on because I can listen to it. If I don't have to do that, or if I've just had a day and my brain cannot cope with doing that, then I will read something either as an ebook or a physical book. But what I will say is that I do not come home and turn on the TV. In fact, I probably won't turn on the TV unless I finish a book for the night. And at the moment, my routine is to read. And then if I have time before I go to bed, then I'll put on an old hockey game or something like that, something that I'm catching up on. I'm not a big TV movie watcher anymore. I used to be, but I'm not. So that time has been swapped for reading. So that's where I make up a huge amount of time. I do get distracted by my phone, and sometimes I will throw it across the couch because I know I'm getting distracted by my phone. This is going to link into something that I talk about in a moment. If I know that I'm getting constantly distracted by my phone while I'm reading, then the book is probably not for me. There is that balance. Like this is the knowing yourself sort of thing. So I have traded screen time and TV and movie watching time for reading. I make up all of those hours where a lot of people would have that there. Also, as I said, I don't have kids. I'm not running around, or a partner. I'm not running around after them worrying about their needs. I don't have to. So the other big thing that helps, and I mentioned this earlier, is knowing your reading taste. Know what you like. Know which authors you like, which genres you like. Do you like long books or short books? What makes you happy reading? Because if you are picking up the things that you enjoy, you are going to read more. There are some authors and genres that naturally read slower than others, and that's totally fine. But the fact is, if you are picking up something that you enjoy, you are more likely to read more, or want to continue reading, or to read longer, or to pick up more books because you have that enjoyment level. It's the serotonin effect, right? Keep that in mind. Surround yourself by things that you really want to read, and if you don't want to read it anymore, get rid of it. It's not going to make you happy. And that links into the next one, which is, if you are not enjoying something, if you find you're putting it down, you're not coming back to it, you're just not interested, you're getting distracted by your phone while you're reading it, DNF it and move on, because that book is obviously not serving you at this moment in time. You don't have to get rid of it if you don't want to, but put it down and choose something else, because obviously that book is not for you right now. And also recognize when you don't feel like reading as well, and don't try and push through it. I know I talked about last month. Last month was a shocker of a reading month for me, just in terms of length of things, not volume, because what I had to do, as I said, I'm a teacher. I read a lot of children's literature generally, but I was not feeling reading long adult novels of any kind, not even the romances. I couldn't even pick up my rereads or books that I loved, because I was not in that headspace to read and enjoy them. And so what ended up happening is I switched them out, and I spent a lot of time reading picture books. I have a second channel, so I was doing a lot of reading for those. It's just different, right? So it's a totally different kind of reading experience, reading a picture book to reading a novel. I also read a lot of much shorter adult novels, because I didn't have the capacity to sit and read for as long as I did, because I was tired, I was exhausted, the whole month was just nuts, and I was recovering from being sick. And so I recognized that. And I think when you recognize that you either can't read what you would like to read, or you just do not feel like reading, you don't have to do it, because all that's going to do is burn you out, right? So you have to think about, how are you feeling in that experience, because you're likely to read more if you actually stop and take a break and then come back to it when you're feeling it, than trying to push through and just, elongating this period of time where you feel like you don't want to read. The other thing that I don't do anymore is I don't read in bed. It's my place. I can choose where I read and whatnot. I do have a chair in my room that I can read, but it's usually covered in my floor drobe. It's my chair drobe. Anyway, I read on the couch. Like I said, I don't watch TV, so the couch is where I read. It's my little book nook. It's constantly covered in books, and that's where I read. Anyone will tell you that's just good sleep hygiene sort of strategies. Don't do stuff in bed, because your bed should be the place where you sleep. So I very rarely do anything other than sleep in my bed. I do have my phone beside my bed, but I don't watch YouTube in my bed, and I don't tend to spend a lot of time scrolling. The only thing I might do is listen to music before I go to sleep, but I've stopped reading in here. This is not a reading space for me very much at all, and that seems to have worked. It means that I know if I'm out in the living room, that's time for reading, and when I come here, it's time for bed, and that sort of helps reset myself. Then I suppose I'm going to come back to that idea of audiobooks. So I was someone who 2-3 years ago could not listen to an audiobook. I couldn't do it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't make my brain comprehend it. I would tune out easily. And so I had to put a few things in place to sort of work my way up into listening to audiobooks. Quite often I will listen to a book I've already read. I find that easier. Weirdly enough, I find fantasy books a lot easier to understand and follow in an audiobook format. And usually they're the books that I'll listen to that I haven't read previously. I don't know, it's a quirk of mine. And yeah, I found that I really like the graphic audios that are being released now. It's a company that's producing these wonderful adaptations of books, as they're basically like radio plays, except they're audiobooks. They've got multiple narrators and sound effects and things like that. They're so fun to listen to, and something that's so easy to follow when you are doing housework or gardening or whatever it is that you're doing. You might put it on in the car. That's the other thing I do. I don't have a car, I don't drive, so I can't listen on long car trips. But while I'm doing things around the house, I absolutely can, and I find that that is really useful. Also, if I feel like not reading with my eyeballs and doing a craft project, audiobooks are great for that as well. And it means that I get to do two things at the same time. Crafting does not require a lot of my brain capacity, so I have some space left over for listening to a book. And so that can be another really great way to get into audiobooks. If you are someone who needs to build yourself up, definitely do go that immersive reading route. Read the book in front of you and have the audio going, and start slow. Don't jump to 2.5 speed. Please don't do that. I do that, but I do not recommend everyone to do that. But I probably would say if you're listening to an audiobook, maybe try 1.5. Just because audio narrators, as I said earlier, they slow down, like their reading pace is usually much slower than a reading pace for a fluent reader. And I suppose then my final thing would be is if you have friends who read, see if they're interested in buddy reading. So buddy reading is where you read the same book at the same time. And what you can do is you can actually set targets. So you can allocate chapters, for this day, we're going to read these 5 chapters, and the next day we're going to read these 5 chapters, or we're going to read 100 pages today and 100 pages tomorrow. Or it could be over a couple of days. Doesn't really matter what the reading pace is. But if you find that you like to have an accountability partner, that can be really great. And also having someone to talk to about the book can be a great way to move through books. Not everyone likes buddy reading, but it can be really useful sometimes with a book, and it can be really fun. It's a really nice experience. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think as long as you recognize what you like and what you don't like to read, and that you are thinking about what it is that you would like to pick up, then you will find yourself to be more successful. Don't read what you think is popular and think that you have to read it. Honestly, I've never been steered correctly in that vein of thinking, because my taste is very specific to me. And if there is something that is super hyped, I'm going to go to friends I know who know my reading taste and ask them if they've read it, if they think it's something that I would like. I would actually rather trust a friend's judgment than people on the internet shouting that this book is amazing. And I also don't want to waste my time on things that I'm just not interested in. So all those things to keep in mind. But reading is very personal, it's very subjective, and you don't have to read more to be a good reader. If you would like to read more, there are ways that you can work on that, but you absolutely do not have to read more. And I think that's something that everyone needs to keep in mind. I think as adults, we have that opportunity to think about, what does reading mean to us? What do we want to get out of the reading experience? And what does that mean for us? I don't know if this discussion will have helped anyone, but hopefully you enjoyed it. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have any tips for reading more. Otherwise, feel free to leave a book stack emoji down below. I hope that wherever you're in the world, just staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.